Now, former NHS staff have warned that they are unable to properly assess children having medical treatment for gender dysphoria over fears that they could be branded transphobic. Sky News research suggests 35 psychologists have resigned from the Children's Gender Identity Service in London in the last 3 years. And this comes amid surging demand from under-18s for help from NHS gender services. Well, joining me now from County Offaly in Ireland is psychotherapist Stella O'Malley, who had gender dysphoria as a child. Stella, good to talk to you. Are you surprised by the seemingly big increase that there has been in recent years in the number of children that are presenting with these concerns?
I'm concerned about them because I wonder, are perhaps children being overdiagnosed? When you say I had gender dysphoria, nobody really was diagnosed with gender dysphoria back then because it was a different name. But I certainly have looked at the DSM, I've looked at all the symptoms and I identify with them. And I had them for a long, long time when I was a child, from around about the age of 3 to around about the age of 10. And I was consistent and I was persistent and I was insistent. And I was a very strident and powerful child. And I believe I would have been the type of child, had I been born 30 odd years later, that would have been very, very insistent on getting puberty blockers. But for me, it would have been the wrong treatment, because for me, when I went into puberty, even though it was horrible and my distress increased significantly, ultimately puberty over those few years was what released me from gender dysphoria, or what certainly I would have termed gender dysphoria or describe the symptoms of gender dysphoria. And since then, I've never had any sort of dysphoric feelings around my gender. And I'm perfectly happy to be a woman, be born the biological. I'm lucky that it didn't persist. I know for some people it does. But for me...
Do you think if you were presenting... Sorry to cut across you, but do you think if you were presenting with those issues today, do you think your treatment would have been very different?
I do. I think I would have been somebody who would have got on the internet. I would have found out about the concept, for starters, of puberty blockers, of being able to halt puberty, which was so distressing for me. And then I would have found my community. And my community would have been, because I know what is often said online, my community would have been very, very positive towards me going on puberty blockers. And while I'm not saying that for some people that might be very, very, very satisfying, to find a community is a very, very intense experience. However, for me, it would have been the wrong decision. And that's why I'm speaking out about it. I do feel that we need to know that puberty blockers for this designation is quite an experiment. Like they're used for cancer treatment, and they were originally designed for children who would have got into precocious puberty at maybe 3 or 4 years of age. And their puberty had to be stopped so that they could go into natural puberty maybe 6 or 7 years later. These days, for the last 10 years, they've been using puberty blockers specifically for children who wish to one day transition. And they were originally marketed as a pause button. And while I was very unsure about because it's very alluring to say a pause button. Now, we all want to give a pause button for life, but it's turned out this pause button isn't what it said it would be. Because it turns out that around about roughly 97, 98% of children who go on puberty blockers then go on to transition. And while there's nothing wrong with transitioning, and if you choose that as an adult who's completely clear about what the road ahead is, that's perfectly fine. But if you're a child and you're 11 years old, you cannot know what the impact of impaired infertility is. You can't know what the impact of your impaired sexual functioning, painful orgasms, bone density issues. You'll wave them away because you're 11 and you're a child and you have that immature, intense emotional brain that is specific to children of that age who are very, very...
I mean, Stella, we spoke to some children who had reservations, but we have spoken to other children in Sally's piece who are very happy with the choices they've made and feel that they are now inhabiting the body that they should have been born with.
Yeah, and we don't know which children are going to be happy and which children aren't going to be happy. And that's why we have to be very slow and explorative, and we have to be the adults in the room. And the clinicians need the freedom to be able to do their work. And so we should be slow and explorative as we figure out what is the best treatment. And right now, it doesn't look like it's slow and explorative at all. Right now, it seems like we're going for the most invasive procedure first, instead of the least invasive procedure first. And the least invasive would be talk therapy. So you explore it, you learn symptoms, you learn exercises, therapeutic strategies to kind of alleviate your distress. And they are out there. Like I'm a psychotherapist, and I would regularly meet very distressed teenagers. And, you know, they might be highly suicidal. And we would use therapeutic strategies to alleviate their symptoms. And what is the real tragedy that's happening here is these massively long waiting lists for people to wait for their therapy. And these children are very young and they're very distressed and they shouldn't be waiting. And that is a terrible tragedy that's happening to them. But also, they shouldn't be told that the only option is puberty blockers when there's a range of highly developed strategies that have been proven to work for highly distressed children. And they should be used first so that we make sure that we go back to the oath, first do no harm, that we make sure that we don't overdiagnose and over-medicalise these children.
Okay, Stella O'Malley, psychotherapist. Interesting to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.